Welcome for our second official Alumni Showcase. Thanks for joining this evening. Everybody's got a lot of things going on in life and responsibilities and work and whatnot. So Alumni Showcase emerged as a way, I guess there was like a question with demo comp, student demo comp has been great. We've been doing demo comp for a lot of years now and wanted to experiment with some other types of events and spaces where it could come together, particularly to share interests, ongoings, creative things, technical stuff, nerdy stuff, weird stuff, you know, get it all in there. So we put together alumni showcase and as kind of like it's like the spin-off show of DemoComp, if you will. And Megan has graciously organized folks tonight. So we got a few things we're gonna do. We have four total. What'd you say, Megan? We got demo, presentation, demo, something like that.
That's
All right.
correct.
Sweet. So we're gonna get into it. Um, we'll have a little bit of space for like questions and so forth if people are willing to take questions, and then we'll get out of here. So let's start it up. I got first on my list, Mr. Dylan Perry. What you gonna be talking about, Dylan? Is a
Hey,
fresh alum, just barely alum.
yeah, so this is a project of mine that definitely I did not start in Turing, but after speaking with some people, we decided maybe it would be a good fit for Alumni Showcase. Put together a little presentation for y'all. I'm very excited to show you. Um, I will share my screen. Let's see. Here we go. Hopefully this works. Okay. So this is my project, Wildlander, and this is a presentation that I have called a brief presentation on the value of failure. And I will get to that. It sounds dramatic. I promise it's not as dramatic as it is, but I thought it was a good, catchy title. And I also wanted to kind of, instead of just going through the application and showing you the features, which I will do, I wanted to impart some of the stuff that I feel like I've learned that was the most valuable. And I promise it ends on a positive note. So hopefully it doesn't bring it down too much. Just trust me, bear with me. So this is a project called Wildlander. Let me fade. There we go. So what the heck is Wildlander? Wildlander is a video game project of mine. It is a collection of user-created modifications, shorthand is mods, for a very popular video game called Skyrim that some of you may be familiar with. It's kind of a open world fantasy sword and dragons, role-playing exploration game. A package of these user-created modifications is also known as a mod pack. This is another term that some of you may be familiar with because it's a pretty popular concept across many different video games that have a robust user community that creates essentially free features for a game, which is really kind of wild. So the mods are collated into an easy to install package. This is kind of one of the hallmarks of a mod pack. And in essence, they work together to transform the original game into, in some cases, a slightly different experience. In our case, a very different experience. It uses the base game as a canvas, so it still is the original game in many respects, but it plays very differently and is intended to almost give you a totally new, fresh experience with the game. Final point here, Wildlander is and must be, and I'll get to that, free. And it's supported through user donation revenue. So crowdfunding platforms like Patreon or Ko-Fi, Coffee is probably how you pronounce that now that I say it out loud. And that's how it's financially supported. Not all, mod packs or projects have a financial support element, but ours definitely does. So first, oh, actually, before I do this, forgot this is where I would like to show you guys some of the kind of stuff, the proof that this project actually exists. So can you still see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, cool. So this is our website that you kind of, we route people to who are interested in the game. Usually they come in through either the modding community or through the various like marketing videos that I've created on YouTube and Twitch. It's a pretty standard landing page that just kind of pitches you the experience and hopefully kind of draws you in. Here's some screenshots of the game as it is presented in our mod pack. Some very pretty northern lands. We got a very spooky looking dragon here. Um, we've got this is honestly one of my favorites. I think one of the reasons that I was drawn to this game is that it's just a really, really beautiful environment that we can make even more beautiful with the various user modifications. And a very scary bear. This is another fun shot. That is a little bit violent. I apologize for that. I should have warned you, but really not that bad as far as video games go. There's a couple cool features that we kind of present as far as the project management goes. We have a pretty robust Airtable board that functions as a roadmap and also an issue tracker. Users can submit feedback and bugs through a Google form, which we integrate through Zapier with Airtable because frankly, it was really not fun to manage that stuff ourselves. These are all generally all other mods that have been suggested by users that we get to kind of evaluate. And most importantly, users can view this stuff themselves. It was really important to me specifically that we had this transparent roadmap so that users stop asking us the same questions over and over, but really so that they can sort of see what we're working on and what our timelines are. We also have a wiki because the game, especially as we implement it, is extremely complex. It's very difficult, and we really needed a resource that users could turn to just kind of figure out how things work and to hopefully kind of take some of the load off of our support crew, which, like every contributor to this project, they are all volunteers who kind of offer their valuable time to answer user questions and help the project grow. So that's kind of the project at a high level. I'll go back to this presentation here. So I've got a slide, the good news, right? These are the things, these are the resume points. If I'm putting this, if I'm applying to a game dev position. Wildlander over its lifespan has accrued over 120,000 unique users, which is a number I'm very proud of. And it has accrued over $140,000 in donation revenue. That seems like a very large number, and I'm very stoked about it. Don't get me wrong, but that also is over 8 years. So it's gone up and down throughout the project's lifespan, but it roughly churns out to like, I don't know, $500, $600 a month. We have a community of 15K users across our Discord and our subreddit. Last year, I definitely put this one on my resume. We won an award from a gaming publication called Game Rant for what is essentially the best Skyrim mod pack. That's a truncated title, but that's what it is, and I was pretty stoked about that. And then finally, I think this is the best part. Wildlander really has served as an incredible learning vehicle for both me and our wider team. It's what taught me, the basics of programming. I've had to learn marketing, I've had to learn project management, community management, and it's really, kind of honed my game design skills. And gaming is one of my biggest hobbies, and hopefully something I get to do full time one day. Maybe we'll see. But so it's not all good news, and this is a presentation titled "The Value of Failure." After all, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So the bad news is that after some success, I tried and failed to make Wildlander a full-time gig. I think that when I started to experience success with this project, which I really did not expect at all, it was like a side project that I put online just for the heck of it, and it kind of blew up and got away from me quickly. Um, I became really attached, I think, to the idea of finding success through this project. And after a long time of reflection, well, before I get ahead of myself, I would say the writing was on the wall by 2020 that neither this product nor this space were particularly monetizable. But I still persisted. I wrote here that I was trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. And I realized later that the reason I did this is because I was frankly pretty scared that I wouldn't be able to replicate this kind of success elsewhere. I had never really experienced success with a project like this before. And as I was actually talking with Jeff about earlier today, or as he was saying, it's very easy, I think, when it's like your first love, your first project, you really can become attached, I think, to kind of doing things the way you think they're going to go. And if stuff starts to happen that shifts it away from that, it's hard to let go sometimes. And the consequence of that is that it was not at all fun anymore. My attempts to monetize, for those of you who don't know, like the whole modding space is kind of culturally anti-monetization. I believe that maybe we could offer some sort of ethical alternatives to monetization for stuff that we owned. It was really just, without going into the details, an uphill battle that was far more trouble than it was worth. And let's just say it didn't pan out the way that I had hoped. And it was pretty sad for a while. However, I did learn a lot. And frankly, I kind of attribute this experience or attribute my current direction to this experience. I wrote here that by accepting that I couldn't meet my financial goals, which I really just couldn't. I live in LA, which is definitely my choice, but it's an expensive place to live, and I'm a 32-year-old man trying to have a family, and I just couldn't subsist. Even at its height, I was making like $2,000 a month, which I was extremely grateful for, but it still just wasn't quite enough to be a full-time position. Um, and when I accepted that was the case and that things wouldn't happen this particular way, it forced me to explore other avenues. And when I did that, it turned out that the world didn't sort of fall down around me the way that I had feared. What actually happened is that I learned that many of the skills I had sort of grown during this project, during 7, 8 years of managing it, really allowed me to be successful in other spaces, and specifically as a freelancer, where I had a wide variety of skills that I was at least proficient at that allowed me to get a wide variety of work. And that gave me at least some confidence to kind of push myself even further. The project also highlighted my love for programming. It was pretty clear after a while that that was what I enjoyed doing most on this project. And that shepherded me to Turing, which I think was the best professional decision I ever made, attending, that is. And I know that if I hadn't had that experience of, branching out into other disciplines, I don't think I would have had the courage to make that call and to take that risk on myself. And now I'm in a position where I get to pursue gainful employment in a field that I love, pretty much knowing that failure is both the best teacher, as annoying as it is sometimes, and also that it's a necessity for the best things in life. I'm currently job searching. As Jeff mentioned, I'm part of the most recent graduated cohort. And just, like, I don't think that this process even would be as approachable as it has been without any of these learnings. And my plan is to hopefully continue maintaining this project on the side. I still have a lot of if anything, I have more passion for it now that it's no longer kind of weighted down with all these expectations. And it's been a great experience and hopefully a great resume builder too. And that is it. Thank you very much for listening, and hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Dylan. Okay, I have questions. If anybody else has questions, maybe throw your
Please feel
Zoom
free.
handy up there. First question for me is like, I guess, I mean, I have played like game mods in the distant past and so forth. It would seem to me like the life cycle here is a very long time from the point where a game is released to where you're talking about curating mods and running community and so forth 8 years later. Is that typical in these spaces where it's like does the community normally last that long, or is it like atypical about this specific space that you got into?
So the short answer is no. There are a lot of games with modding communities that do last quite a long time, but even if that is the case, they're not nearly as big as Skyrim. Skyrim's modding community, for a variety of different interesting factors, is one of the largest, probably second only to Minecraft, which is absolutely huge. But Wildlander is definitely atypical in both its longevity and its scale. And that was actually one of the things that drew me to it. I've been a big fan of this series for a very long time. The fact that there had been this, decades long modding community for Bethesda's other role-playing titles, I think fueled it a lot. And it created, if your goal is to curate a new experience using, your own mods and a wide variety of other ones, like Skyrim is such an exceptional opportunity for that because there are so many people contributing mods to it.
Hmm.
So no, usually I would say it also depends largely on how well the tools are supported by the original developers, and this is some of the the best supported stuff in the industry.
Hmm. Interesting. Love it. Rob?
Yeah, this was super cool. I can relate to a little bit of it because I run a music forum that's like a Patreon based thing, and I've gone
Mm.
it's of like a lot of passion and wanting to grow it and then just kind of letting it be. I'm curious, like you mentioned all these skills that you learned, marketing, a bit of programming, like what sort of like programming stuff drew you into the field, and then like what skills were like the least pleasant for you to learn?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for asking that. I'm happy to talk about it. The primary language that Skyrim is written in is a proprietary language called Papyrus. It is an object-oriented language, and it's a pretty interesting cross between, it's almost like it's very heavily JavaScript inspired. And there's also like strong elements of Python and Ruby in there. Um, I loved learning that. I kind of avoided it. It's actually almost like a little microcosm of the wider story, my experience with programming in Skyrim, because I avoided it for a very long time and just used some of the more like standard rudimentary tools to edit the game. I was afraid I couldn't do it, frankly. I've always had kind of this hang up when it came to programming, and I felt like it would be too complicated for me. And then when I kind of got to the point where the features I wanted to implement just weren't possible anymore with those like simpler tools, um, I finally kind of bit the bullet and realized that actually this is super sick. And like programming is such an awesome way to solve problems. You can take so many different approaches. I think that's what really resonated with me about like programming and why I was drawn to that component. As far as the skills that I was never particularly stoked about, it's an easy answer. That would be the project management. I've never been a particularly organized person. I would still today not even describe myself as a particularly organized person. I'm kind of a reluctant organizer, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. And I think that it took having kind of forcing myself through that organization in those initial stages. You're constantly caught in that cycle of like, well, I don't have time to plan things out because I have too much on my plate, right? And then you realize that half the reason why you feel so overwhelmed all the time is that you have almost no organization, very little direction, and most importantly, you have no means of knowing whether or not you're on pace. As Jeff actually also said earlier today, you can't tick off boxes on a to-do list if there's no to-do list, and you can't benefit from the psychological kind of boost that you get when you're hitting your targets and completing issues and stuff like that. So once I finally got myself to do it with a lot of help from my wife, who's very organized, and also help from my team, who's also very organized comparatively, I kind of understood the value, and now I do it, and sometimes I enjoy it, but sometimes I'm like, but I know that I need it, so I do it anyway. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, Rob, for asking a question. Let's roll in to Tony time. Hello, Tony Rib.
Hey, Jeff. All right,
What
let me see.
what you gonna be talking about today?
I'm doing a lightning talk on what an infrastructure engineer does. Let me see if I can share the right thing. Oh, I got to open system preferences. We don't use Zoom at my work, so give me a second here. We actually use Google Meet.
Hmm.
So I am like never on Zoom. And I got to quit and reopen, so hang on.
We'll be right back. Brief intermission. All right. then we'll ask Dylan one more question. Dylan, if you were gonna, if somebody who's come through Turing, either for a long-term job thing or maybe just for short-term kind of fun, says like, "Oh, I want to get involved in some games. Or I don't know anything about it. I want to get involved." Probably not like writing a game from scratch. It seems like stepping into modding is like a more accessible space. What direction would you point them? Like if baby Dylan was showing up on the scene today in 2024, where would he go?
To be honest, I'd probably do, oh, sorry for that noise. That's my buzzer. I would direct them to do exactly what I did, which was exactly what you said. Just find a game that you really like that has, modding tools, that has a community. Usually those communities are really helpful. There's like a really great sort of open source attitude in most of them. And it's a great spot to learn in a relatively stress-free environment. And there's a very quick feedback loop depending on what it is that you're doing. You can it's very cool to have even that first feeling of, I'm trying to make this thing and now I've made it and now I see it in the game. I think that's kind of where people get hooked. I know that it was that case for me.
Yeah, I love it. All right, thank you, sir. Tony time.
Yes,
Version
now I'm
2.
ready. Clearly, I should have prepared more ahead of time.
How dare you?
All right, so this is a lightning talk on basically what I do now as a job. I didn't really have a catchy title, but I want to give this presentation, especially for people that are like currently entering or recent grads that maybe don't know what this job is. Because I personally didn't know this was a career path that I could take when I graduated from Turing. So this is a brief background of me and what I've done since graduating here, just to give you an idea of when I got into infrastructure engineering. But since it's not a talk about me, if you want to learn more, you can actually listen to the podcast that I did last year with Turing, which is linked on the bottom here. So historically, Turing has had a front end and a back end program, which are probably the biggest buckets of software engineering that you're going to find. But there's an entire ecosystem surrounding these two functions that make up a cohesive software engineering team. And if you're working at a really small startup that might just like deploy with Heroku or something similar, you may not need an infrastructure team. But once you get into larger companies, it's kind of a necessity. So this isn't really an exhaustive list of like all the pieces here or all the pieces that exist to make a full software department run. But I'm going to be focusing on the infrastructure part because I think it's a really fun job and one that isn't talked about a whole bunch. So as a product developer, which is your backend and front end engineering, you've completed your code and your application. So what are you going to do with it? Well, that code has to be built or packaged in some way so that it can eventually run in production with all of its dependencies. And because you wrote some excellent tests, hopefully, it needs to have all of those run and maybe some other important checks somewhere before it's allowed to be deployed. So speaking of deploys, there is a whole bunch of stuff out there right now that allows you to get your application where it's actually going to be run, right? And so where is that place? Kubernetes is really big these days, and there's an entire ecosystem of things related to that you have to manage if you're going to run it on there. But you could just be doing something as simple as running it on some dedicated servers that Amazon provides, for instance. But once it is deployed, you're gonna have to store your customer's data somewhere. So you're likely looking at some type of managed database solution to handle that. And there's a whole set of other things that your application needs to interact with. Maybe you're generating files like invoices. You need to upload them to S3 so your customers can download them. How does a user actually typing in www.yourapp.com get directed to the code for your application running on a server somewhere? Somebody has to be managing that networking layer. And you're also going to have to manage all these resources in some way and keep track of them so you can tell when they changed and why, just like you do with your regular code. And for all developers, you're going to fuck up production at some point. It happens to everyone, and it's a rite of passage. But when you do that, you're going to want to be able to access all your application's logs and metrics and probably notify an on-call engineer who can hop on and try to figure out what's wrong. So if you haven't guessed it, all of this is infrastructure engineering. And it is a lot. There are a ton of different systems that you need to learn about and way less documentation about any of them that you're going to find if you're Googling a Ruby or JavaScript error. And you're also going to have to modify the application code at some point to make these things work. So we do that too. So the even scarier, but in my opinion, more fun part of all this is not only do you have access to all these systems that other developers may not, you have full admin access into them. So I refer to that as God mode. If I wanted to drop tables on production right now, I could. I could also go delete our entire production deployment with one command. Uh, but I also get to play around really deeply in our systems in ways that most developers are not allowed for security reasons to actually do. So it is kind of cool, like having that trust from your engineering team. Which brings me to another big difference between an infrastructure engineer and a product developer. Well, your job as a product developer is to make a product that customers love and use and are so happy with that they just want to use it even more. My job is to modify the underlying systems in such a way most of the time that nobody notices that I've done anything at all. It's a whole bunch of upgrades and re-architectures and full scale, like migrating one application from one system to another. And the last thing I want to do when I'm doing any of these things is cause downtime or accidentally drop critical data. So why would you want it? It sounds kind of scary and like a lot of work. So if you love learning, this is a job that's full of challenges. You are constantly learning something new. If you're bored of writing your 50th Rails controller or React container, this would be a good job for you. Your customers are also your fellow developers at your company. So if you like your fellow developers, great, make their job easier, make them happier. It's also a specialty job. There's less people that want to do this. Therefore, you're competing with less people for a job, and it generally pays slightly higher than other development jobs because of that. And so it was also a giant list of things in the beginning, right? Like nobody I've met in this field is amazing at all of them. My specialties personally are database performance, Kubernetes, and observability. But I suck at networking most of the time. I'm okay with it. It's a fact. My team knows it. I get them to help me out when I make mistakes. Though I will say yesterday I solved my own networking problem and I was very excited about it. So I'm slowly but surely getting better there. So how would you become an infrastructure engineer if you don't actually have any training in that? My advice is go befriend your infra or DevOps engineer. Ask them next time there's an outage if you can shadow them. Ask them if you could just shadow them on any random day, or do like I did and then take a rotation onto the infra team and never actually go back again. But basically just go get involved. So if I can leave you with one thing, it's that infra engineering is awesome and you should totally try it. And that's it.
Thanks, Tony. Is it, you know, when you're putting together the big diagram, like as Laura was saying in the chat, it's a lot. Can you sandbox, build your own things in an incremental way? Like, can I take some Turing project and is it useful to try and kind of play dress up and build some of these tools around it and so forth and build pipelines and deployment and monitoring and all that? Or is it like, it's, if you don't have real people using it, it's not going to teach you anything. So like, don't even bother.
I mean, it could still teach you some stuff. Like there's no reason you couldn't say, let me see if I can like get a Circle CI pipeline running my tests every time I push my code to GitHub, so that I don't have to remember to do all that. I will say it's a lot of YAML engineering. So you're going to be writing a lot of YAML files to do any of these things.
Yeah, one of the, the over the last 15 years, the Ruby and like Rails world has spread some interesting trends across software engineering, and one of them is like YAML. Like no one used YAML before Ruby Rails people used it. Now it's like embedded in lots of places, which is, well, I guess how would you describe YAML if people are like, I don't even know what that is?
It's basically just, I don't know, white space indented. It's almost like JSON, except for you care about the white space instead of, having a bunch of commas and strings and a giant like Ruby-ish block. It gets annoying when, in the infra world at least, we don't just have YAML files, we have templated YAML files. So then you have to like have variables that get templated into your YAML files, and trying to put if blocks into a YAML file is like annoying, but definitely a thing that we have to do all the time. But I I would say like if you're just working on the product development side, you're not going to deal with it that often. I feel like I spend half of my life in YAML at this point. Like it's just Kubernetes adopted it as like the main thing. And that means like basically everything else in the ecosystem started adopting it as their thing too.
Can you explain, do you know what YAML stands for?
No, I don't.
Yeah, it's a terrible answer, which is that YAML stands for YAML ain't a markup language. And this is like a old school, like Perl people kind of joke to have recursive acronyms where the acronym stands for itself.
Isn't that like GNU?
Is it what?
GNU, GNU, it's
Yeah.
GNU.
GNU's not Unix or whatever, or like, yeah. Yeah. So real old school nerdy nerds in this space. Okay, there are questions in the chat. Shane says, does infrastructure engineering have a lot of inherent on-call time in order to be there when issues crop up? And if so, does that mean you get paid a lot for being on call?
So I'll say I'm on call right now, actually, until 7 p.m. when my coworker in Australia takes over. But it really, really depends. In my last job, we did week-long 24/7 on call on the infra team between like anywhere from 4 to 6 of us. And I was paged all the time, like any time of day, any time of night. Like I brought my laptop if I was going to a friend's house and was on call and could get someone to cover time. Like we always, like if I was going to the gym, I'd have a coworker cover it because it was like, you never know. So it could be stressful. At my current job, where I've been for 7 or 8 months now, I'm on call every other week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I forget that I'm on call most of the time. Like, I don't get people to cover my stuff. I get paid like once a month or so. And yeah, it's mostly responding to like a Slack, like at infrastructure on call handle during the day when people are like, hey, can you do this thing for me since you have elevated permissions, or approve mine, or like look into this with me? And so it's like not stressful at all. I have been the infrastructure engineering, like on the salary side, bands at both places I've worked now are slightly shifted higher than the regular engineering bands. But neither place has paid extra for on call. So it's not like I hear that is a thing at some companies. I know it was a big point of contention at my last company because on call was so stressful all across the product teams too. But it really depends on where you go. And I would say, like, for sure, it's something you should ask about in the interviews ahead of time, because yes, you are definitely going to be on call as the infra person because you have all the elevated access to everything in AWS, everything in the Kubernetes clusters, all your databases. So if there's a problem that needs solving that needs you to be able to like hop in, like your team will always have an on-call rotation.
Kind of reminds me of like being in the military and getting like combat pay or whatever. It's like you should get what you're supposed to get and then like a little extra because it's kind of fucked up that you have to take your laptop to the gym or whatever the scenarios. All right. Thanks, Tony.
Welcome.
And third up, we got Rob. You're selling mountains, Rob?
Something like that.
Okay, this is controversial in Colorado here, right? Where like some people are blocking off some 14ers because it's like private land access. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah,
That's what you're facilitating.
I'm planning to buy all the mountains with
Makes sense.
all my extra on-call money that I get.
Perfect. I hand it over to you.
All right. Cool. I'll start with my little presentation first. Can everyone see my screen? Cool. Thanks for coming to my presentation. It's called my app's called Mountain Resale. If anyone's wondering, this is Rocky Mountain National Park, and that mountain is Notchtop Mountain. As a side note, if anyone ever wants to hear about my longest day I've ever had in the mountains, it occurred on that mountain, and feel free to ping me later. All right, so this is me. My name's Rob. I like to build things. Went to Turing 1903. Was in the backend program. Now work as an infrastructure engineer, but I still like to code on the side. And so I also, let's see, I love playing in the mountains, as you might expect. Climbing, it fills me with a lot of joy. And as I've learned, lots of different types of climbing require lots of different types of gear. So here on the right, you can see, just a regular day of winter climbing, some of the things that might be required, ice tools, screws, pack, helmet, down jacket, harness, crampons, dry cheater rope. As you imagine, or as you might imagine, some of this can be pretty expensive. So one day I was in the back of a car going to Utah and I came up with an idea. Why is it not going forward? All right, there we go. So the app that I built, it's mountainresale.com. It's basically eBay, but for outdoor gear, um, climbing mostly, or snowboarding, skiing, etc. It's basically mod 2, little shop all over again. The horror never ends, except with real money. But I would argue that in a development job, like really your whole life is kind of a little shop. So it just makes sense to keep that going. So the way the business works, it's a C corp. I use Stripe API for payments between sellers and buyers, and the app takes a 5% transaction fee for sales. Some just stuff about the development and production setup. It's all Dockerized, just basic little Docker Compose file with a web app and a Postgres database and Chrome server to run some integration tests, and an app to catch emails. Also, I created a little CLI tool to run it and migrate things, install gems, etc. So it's not as much having to remember all the Docker commands if you don't want to. This is the way that it's running in production currently. It's as an infrastructure engineer, this is very underwhelming. It's all on one server, and basically a request hits DNS. It goes to a server that has Docker installed on it. It's a reverse proxy, goes to the full stack Rails, Stimulus, Tailwind app. Postgres is running on the server currently, but as the app grows, that's probably the first thing I would change on the infrastructure side. Users' images are in a storage bucket, and emails go out through the Mailgun API. So I will stop sharing this and show you the app real quick. Let's see, share my next window. All right, so this is the app. I can log in. It's 50-50 of whether or not this will go to spam. Let's see, sorry. If I go to my email, then it didn't go to spam. That's cool. Click login, uses devise, logs you in. It's my computer sounds like it's going to take off, but yeah, this is it. You can add things to the cart, delete things from the cart. If you check out, then let's see, let's add a couple things. If I go to checkout, then it'll basically take me to a Stripe checkout flow, which will then pay the seller, and the application gets the 5% fee. If I, let's see if I go back, if I want to, if I'm not signed up, if I want to become a seller, I can go to here, click this button, become a seller, and that'll take me to a Stripe seller sign up flow. You just enter a little bit of information so that you can accept payments on the worldwide. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Once you're signed up as a seller, you get a dashboard and some things too. And yeah, I don't know. Thanks for letting me share.
All right. Thanks, Rob. So thought number one, what if when you list items, you could then drop into a Skyrim mod where you get to try out the items in 3D open world space? Okay, just maybe we can bring it all together and Tony will help you deploy it. Question number two, real question is, okay, so the nerd parts make sense. Build in the things. Now, how do you get people to use it?
That is the next real question. There's probably only 11. Well, last time I checked, there was 11 users signed up. My plan right now is word of mouth. I'm also trying to acquire a bunch of things to list them myself just to propagate it with more items. All the items right now are listed by friends basically that are helping me out. They have well, um, yeah, I don't know. This is a good question and something I've been thinking about. Like, I've been considering some sort of email marketing campaign or trying to maybe do a little bit of targeted ads. I also am about to print off a bunch of like just kind of like media stuff to, post it around. I don't know. This is the challenging part. The MVP pretty much just got working like or I just got it working like a week and a half ago. So this is the next big thing, the next big undertaking.
All right, can I give you a suggestion?
Yes,
Would you
please.
like an idea? Okay,
Yes.
do you know the Colorado Mountain Club?
I do know the Colorado Mountain Club.
So what I would do, the best way to like build an audience is to access one that already exists. And in a scenario where you have a membership type organization, Colorado Mountain Club is like a membership org here in Colorado that supports mountaineering stuff and avalanche safety and all kinds of things like that. Is I would pitch them of like, hey, I'm trying to get this thing going, da 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 da. If we could include it in the newsletter, then for 120 days, or anybody who signs up through this account or whatever, if they make a purchase or a sale, we'll donate the 5% right back to Colorado Mountain Club.
I like that idea. I was previously a member of the Colorado Mountain Club, but it is lapsed, and this would be a good. I like the idea of tapping into existing groups of people, and it's not something that I've considered, and I will be thinking about other groups as well. And there's so many of those: the American Alpine Club, the Access Fund, etc.
Yep. Yep. People love like give and get things, like Tom's Shoes kind of launched their whole deal off like buy a pair of shoes and they give one away and so forth. Or if it's 2.5% of every sales going to the nonprofit, be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come buy some stuff. I'll list some stuff. So just some thoughts for you. All right, Laura, in Laura's mystery gray box here, you got a question. Hey.
Yeah. I think word of mouth is gonna, I think it'll do really well with word of mouth. I'm really excited to share it with my friends, and being outdoorsy myself and my friends are, yeah, it's a cool app. My question for Rob is, do you have any future features, like next iterations? What do you want to do with it?
Yeah, so being a side project that I'm essentially bootstrapping, there is effectively infinity features that I would like to implement. But right now, the first thing that I want to do is get like a better shipping situation where like shipping costs are calculated separately. I would love to have an API like where it calls out where people can print labels, just like eBay. I want messaging between sellers and buyers. Another thing that I would love to have is like a kind of like eBay, but a little different, but like make an offer where you say to a seller, like, hey, I'll buy this thing, but I don't want to pay like $40. Do you want $20 for it? And the seller can be like, no, or yes. And then you say, what about 30? And they say, okay. And then boom, like, so I would love some sort of mechanism for that. I would love for emails not to go to spam when they go to Gmail. I still don't understand why all my headers are right and I'm going through an API. But yeah, those are like the top of the list. Oh, admin panel. That's right now. If I want to change things, I'm just doing SQL queries on the prod database, which is not ideal. But yeah, so those are some of my main things that come to mind right now.
Have you ever read like the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss?
No, I've heard of the 4 Hour Work Week, and I know kind of about the indie hacker community and some of this stuff, but I have not read it. I would like to read it. Unfortunately, I work way more than 4 hours a week right now with this side project in my current.
Well, until you read the book, that's the point, And Tim Ferriss is a lot. Like, I'm not saying I'm not a like rah Tim Ferriss, but there's interesting ideas in there, right? And I think, if Tim Ferriss was advising you, he would probably say things like, you should list things on the app that are actually for sale on Amazon, and then see if anyone's like list it for $10 less than it's listed on Amazon, and eat the $10 if people buy it, and then just like order it yourself through Amazon and ship it to them to prove like, will anyone order things if it's price competitive, or is it that they don't care about price or whatever? I don't know. It's interesting space.
Interesting concept. Right now, I have some friends that have like closets full of shit that I basically can that they will loan me on retainer indefinitely.
Yeah. Consignment.
Yeah, consignment. I like the idea is for the app to be like other people doing consignment, but it seems right now that I will probably be listing a lot of it myself.
Yeah. There's a company in Denver
Wilderness Exchange
called Fluid Rentals. Have you ever heard of Fluid Rentals? It was like when Turo was just getting started, Fluid was pretty much the same idea, like rent your own car out. And what they did was start buying cars and then listing them themselves. So it'd be like over half the listings were all the same dude. And it's like, this is the guy who owns the company. They're I don't know, falsely, but they're somewhat misleading that they're all listed under his thing. But what they learned through it was that Turo kind of like stole their lunch money on car rental. The thing they had that Turo didn't have was moving vans. And they bought some like janky old vans, and they were very popular. And then they started buying more vans, and now it's just a moving van rental company. But it's like, it's interesting what you can learn as you make some transactions happen, build some community and some throughput, So I love it. Thanks for sharing with us, Rob, and thanks for tolerating me giving you unsolicited business ideas.
Well, I told you I wanted the advice, so it wasn't unsolicited.
We'll accept. Thanks, Rob. And finally, we got Michael. Can Lily eat it? The first thing that popped in my head was Tribe Called Quest. Can I kick it? It's like, but there's too many syllables here to make a remix of Can I Kick It? So can Lily eat it? Question mark.
Yes.
Well, you answer the question, then we don't need an app or anything. Okay.
It used to be no, now it's yes. So let me just share my screen real quick. I don't have like any slides. I'm just kind of going off the app here, but my name's Michael Callahan. I was 2303 back end, so I graduated I don't know, 6 months ago. I wanted to share this app because I just recently signed an offer last week because I got a job or an apprenticeship for the summer. And this was actually the application that I presented during the interview process. So I just figured it would like hopefully I don't know, shed some light on like what I did, and I don't know, it got me a job, so I figured, it's probably worth sharing with other people. It's not like some crazy application that I thought I would need to build and like really show off. So it's kind of simple, and I just built it in React and Rails API. So a little bit about it. It was meaningful to me, which was kind of like the number one thing that I was going for, because I was having I was just struggling to like come up with an idea to like build something, and I was like uninspired. So I built this app for my sister. My niece had a pretty severe dairy and soy allergy like after she was born, and she was like having a lot of problems. She couldn't eat, like my sister couldn't eat anything dairy or soy related, or else my niece would have pretty severe problems. And she was having trouble like figuring out what she could and could not eat, because certain things or one of the main problems is that the FDA doesn't require like refined soy products, like less than 2% soybean oil. Doesn't have to be listed as like an allergen per se on a food label, but those kinds of things were still giving her trouble. So I figured, why not build an application that does UPC search? So it just takes the UPC code, and based on your allergens, it'll tell you whether or not you can eat it or not. So started out really small, actually. I literally just built like a screen with the search bar. You put the UPC code in, and it would just tell you whether or not it had dairy or soy, and whether or not you could eat it. Since then, I've got it to this point where actually I was going to do like just creating an account. I have no idea how many tests, but this all has validations on it. So the front end validates stuff because like I was having some trouble where like if you tried to sign in, the back end would kick it back. So everything gets validated on the front end before it sends it to the back end API. Just little password requirements here. That was some feedback I got from a friend. This part was kind of tricky because I said I started out really small. Like just some of the cool things that like popped up when I was like going through the development cycle, where like selecting your allergens, like where does this come in? Like obviously a new user has to be like makes sense. So a new user has to select them upon creating their account. So decide to like rework and make sure that like we got an okay from the backend that I've already created a user. So now I could go ahead and like associate the allergens with the created user. So you can save them there. You can update them here. I would like to have them like pre-selected just so it shows which ones you already have listed. So it's really super simple. Because I've already selected the allergens, you can just like come in here, pop in a UPC code. And this did not work during my live demo for the job. And they just laughed it off. So that was nice. But I saved the food and then it showed up today. That's awesome. So yeah, pretty much it's good foods, bad foods. And that's kind of all it does at this moment. I do have some like future plans. Let me zoom bars of the way. So just like quick on the architecture. Right now, I obviously only have like the web application, which I have on a React front end, which is a pretty big feat for me coming from the back end program. There was a lot of learning to do there. Build it with a Rails API, Postgres database, authentication, which was kind of troubling. So I have it using JSON web token. So when you log in, you get a JSON web token, and then you use that for it's encrypted, so you don't have to pass the user ID back and forth between the front and the back end, which I thought was pretty neat. And then I'm in the process of building like a React Native mobile application. I just figure like the best thing for a user to do with an application like this would be able to like scan with your phone. So I'm working towards that. I recently learned that UPC scanner APIs are like $100 a month. So looking to avoid that, I think I might use like OpenAI and just like send it a picture and get the UPC code that way. I'm open to other ideas if you can think of anything. So definitely shoot me a message if you have a better idea. And then just a couple like, yeah, so that's a little bit about the future. I built it purposefully separated from like Rails API and React front end because I did have this in mind. So that was something I talked about in the interview process. Like, I think that was, and this is a bigger Miro board. So I'll give you like just showed like my planning process for all of this, like in the interview. And like about my future plans, like the design decisions by like having it like kind of a SOA architecture. So that way I could get this up and running. And also like that it was like real users. Like I did send it to my sister, and a lot of times she was sending it to me because it was still in development and didn't have it deployed for so long. But one fun thing was that like Lucky Charms were giving her some trouble, and we found out that there's gelatin in them. And that was like, yeah, apparently that can contain, I think it was dairy, sometimes in gelatin. So some real use cases. And then, yeah, I already mentioned like I learning from some of the projects I built in Mod 3 and Mod 4, like starting with like such a grand idea and then having to scale back as you realize you couldn't do things. I was really intentionally trying to start super small. And like it just searched with hard-coded backend and delivering results based on dairy and soy, and then trying to everything that I implemented from that point on, I was just trying to keep in mind like what would be the best use case, or like for a user, like what made the most sense. So having an account, being able to save foods, and then changing your allergens, adding more allergens. And yeah, that's kind of everything I had. I just thought like, I don't know. I think before I started this project, I was sort of caught up on like, what can I build that's going to impress somebody and like blow them away? And all I kept seeing online was like, build something that's meaningful to you. and this is what I came up with. And I think, yeah, everything I talked about was like went over really well. So I just wanted to share that for people like in a similar position to I was like a month ago.
Thanks, Michael. I remember reading an article like 10 years ago about working with UPCs. And the thing, I can't remember what kind of project I was cooking up at the time, but I wanted to use like a gun, like a physical gun to read UPCs and then have that go into the app. And I was like, oh, you're going to have to, use some library interface to the hardware and USB ports and all this stuff. And it turns out that UPC guns, they implement like a keyboard interface. And so it essentially just comes through to you like someone typing numbers on a keyboard. And I was like, oh, that's quite simple. So that's kind of the opposite of what you're trying to do. But just for your background knowledge, in case you ever think you want to go down the road of doing something with UPCs and like a scanner, it's way easier than you think, because essentially you can set up your form, right, so that it like write a little bit of JavaScript so it auto submits when it gets to a certain number of digits. And so then when you scan with the thing, it pops in 12 digits into the field, auto submit whatever you want to happen, and then just have it put the cursor back in your hidden text box for it to take the next one. It's like crazy easy. As far as processing images of UPCs, I don't. The AI piece is interesting. It does feel kind of high stakes to get AI hallucinating about what UPC it saw or whatnot. But overall,
Yeah.
like, really cool project. I love that it's like tied to something you care about, and I'm sure that came through in the interview demo process and so forth.
Yeah, I was not like, I don't know. That was just the first idea I came up with, was like using AI, just because I didn't want to pay $100 a month for an API that like I felt like I could do it a different way. So yeah, I'm still looking. I'm still in the research phase of that.
Yeah, I would expect there to be something more reasonable, but I haven't looked at it myself. All right. Kim had a question in the chat. Well, yeah. Kim
Oh
had a
yeah,
question about where are you getting ingredients list from?
good question.
So when you do get a UPC or whatnot.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the I actually am not using an API for that. I like did a lot of research and I pretty much just scoured the internet for like the 8 allergens or the allergies that you can have. I have just compiled like a really, really, really long list. And that seems to be working. Like I just went on like every like .org that I could find of like where does soy found, and I just have like a huge like hash stored in the database, and it's just searching that. So that was just like a little bit of legwork on my end, but
So you like manually scrape the internet.
yeah. So that's why there's only 8. So I think for scalability, it probably would make more sense to like add more allergens to have like something do the work for me.
Okay, so hold on. I think there might be mismatch in the question and the way you're hearing it is like, so when you know the allergens and so forth, how do you determine whether a product has those allergens in it?
Oh, good. Yeah, so that's what I scour the internet for all of like the potential ingredients that allergens are found in. So each allergen has like a found in hash.
Yes.
And then I've kind of built, I guess it's like technically an algorithm, but it's basically just a function. And it'll separate the ingredients list, and it'll check every word in the ingredients list of a product. And
where do you
if
get the
it
ingredients from?
Oh, that I'm using an API for. So the UPC finds the food, and then I separate the ingredients out, and I search them all, and then I probably should have showed that, but like it'll tell you, and it'll pull the ingredient out that it found as a like potential allergen.
Yeah, I love it. It'd be cool in there to look at like kind of a confidence score where there are some ingredients that like could contain an allergen. And it's like, well, if you have one could, then maybe the confidence is like 30%. But if you have three coulds, then the confidence is like 70% or whatever. I don't know anything about statistics, but could be kind of cool. Sounds great. I think that is everything from the chat. Thanks, Michael, for sharing your project, and glad it was, has been interesting to work on and also gave you some concrete rewards. So good luck in the apprenticeship now.
Thank you.
This summer. All right, y'all. Thanks for getting together this evening, and thanks, Megan, for organizing. Even though she's been sick, she's pushing through with kind of like a little bit of gravel in here, but making it happen. Thanks, Megan. We'll do Alumni Showcase again, probably in about 7 weeks-ish, plus or minus, next inning. And nice to see y'all. Thanks for taking all my questions and whatnot. We'll post the recording in the next couple days and hope to see you again soon. All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you.